Welcome to Train Signal. You are watching Monitoring and Troubleshooting vCenter Server and vSphere Hosts. So this lesson is going to be on some simple things we can do for connectivity between vSphere Hosts and vCenter, and also to make sure vCenter is up and running. Nothing too complicated here, and really I'm having a hard time figuring out a great set of exam or lab questions for them to hit you with to use some of this, but it's in the blueprint. I want to make sure you understand it. Maybe you'll get a host with management agent issues or something like that. And they have you do this, but we'll see. So the easiest answer to a lot of management connectivity problems, like a host has dropped out of vCenter and won't reconnect, but you know the host is up, and you know that the VMs are up and functioning, but they won't talk. The answer to that a lot of times is to restart the management agents. So you can basically shotgun this and restart it using services.sh, which is a shell script, and it restarts a bunch, or basically all, the management services. Or you can do some of the individual parts, such as hostd and vpxa, by doing /etc/init.d hostd restart or vpxa restart. You can also get a view of all your services that are listening by doing ESXCLI network IP connection lists, kind of like doing a netstat in Windows. So let's take a look at these. So first, let's do ESXCLI network, and you'll know it's IP. And then we can do connection, and the only option is list. So it's going to show everything. Let me dump this to more. And so it shows the protocol, receives, sends, local address, foreign address, state, and world name. So you can see exactly which world is listening, and it'll show which ports it's listening on. So 443, things like that. If you want to know if, say, host D is listening, or what FDM is doing, something like that. So it's a quick and dirty way to see that. Then you can run some commands, and initd holds a lot of startup and shutdown script commands. So you could do like fault domain managers here. If you do the vCloud agent, that's right here. My lab has that installed. So some different things, but the ones I'm worried about are hostd and vpxa. So what you can do is sudo /etc init.d vpxa restart, and it'll restart that agent. You can do /etc init.d hostd. You can do status. If you just do enter, it'll show you what your commands are. You can do status, and it'll say that it's running, but if it's not working correctly, you can also do a restart. Then you can use the bigger hammer, which is services.sh. You don't get a status option there because it's a lot of different services and agents, so it'd be, it's no real way to say yes or no. Some things may be up, some things may be down, but you can do restart. And that's going to take several minutes because it does a bunch of stuff. So you just let that run in the background, and hopefully your host will reconnect to vCenter, or manually try to reconnect it to vCenter once it's done. And maybe this will save you a reboot of the vSphere host. That way you don't have to worry about taking VMs down, because I've seen it. Management hosts or agents will fail for some reason. The VMs are fine. They're running great. You don't want to have to do anything to upset those in the middle of the day. So we just do this, and it restarts them. So vCenter, we've looked at the vPXA log in vCenter before. That is your information center. So if vCenter doesn't start, you go into Windows, you can't connect to vCenter using the VI client. You go into the Windows box, you go to services, look at the vCenter service, and it's not started. You start it, and it sits there for 5 seconds and fails, or instantly fails. I'm going to tell you to look at the vPXA log first. Look at the newest one, scroll to the bottom, and figure out what the messages mean. Also, highly suggest you check database connectivity. Now, usually if this is a problem in the vPXA log, it's going to tell you timeout talking to database, or can't find database, or something in there about ODBC SQL in your database name. So it's at least a hint. Then I'm going to tell you to open up your ODBC tool and just test the data source. You'll need to make sure you type in the right authentication if you use, Windows-based or, SQL-based authentication. And also I want you to ping the database server. Make sure, you can ping by name, ping by IP, and just get a good response to it, assuming that you don't have a firewall on the database server blocking ICMP. But I want to make sure that there's connectivity there, because things do happen to the database. Sometimes DBAs do things and don't tell you, so confirm that. But usually that's spelled out pretty well within the vPXA log. Confirm the health of the actual database. Make sure the database is up, right? Make sure it's up, it's green, it didn't run out of space on the transaction log volume, and there's no other issue there. If you don't have access to it, get with the DBA and find that out. But that happens more often than you would think, that it runs out of space, especially depending on their recovery mode and transaction logs grow, if the databases don't get backed up correctly or the logs don't get truncated correctly, they will fill up and cause a problem. A couple of good articles here, KB articles, vCenter startup and database connectivity. I don't expect you to have to troubleshoot vCenter startup, mainly because there's like 487 different reasons that vCenter may not start up. But I think it's worth the time to kind of skim those articles and at least have an understanding. Again, I don't expect it, but I don't want to send you in unprepared. The biggest issues I think would be checking the vCenter service, pulling up the VPXA, making sure the ODBC connection is good. But I would be surprised to see this on the exam. But you know what? VMware has surprised me before, so I'm not going to say never. ESX firewall troubleshooting, I mean, really, it's all about your rule sets. Badly configured rule set will cause a problem, so you just want to confirm that. And you can do that one of two ways. I mean, the quick way I would do it in the lab is via client. You can also do it via the CLI. So let's take a quick look at that. So first, let's go to VI Client, go to Mr. Bumblebee, go to the Configuration tab, Software, and Security Profile. Move him to the left so we give some more room. These are your enabled services that we've looked at before. So if something's not working, confirm it's enabled and started. And then you've got your firewall rules. So we can do properties. You can make sure that things are allowed in. You can accept or decline. And then you can pick an individual option like the SSH server, go to firewall, and specify that you can only access it from certain IPs. So maybe they say, hey, Bob the admin can't SSH into this host, but Jill the admin in this other building, which happens to be on another subnet, gets to it fine. What do you think the problem could be? Well, it sounds like firewall or network issue to me, so I'd come in and make sure SSH server is enabled, which it probably is since Jill could get in. So you want the ESXi shell, SSH, but then I'd look at properties here and look at the firewall rules and make sure that Jill's subnet is not the only one enabled, which would make sense if Bob can't get in. So look for things like that. From a command line perspective, I mean, it's all done through the ESX CLI command. So I believe that's network, firewall. And if you want to look at the rule sets, it's a rule set subtree, and then you can do list and list those out. You can, if it's something like the example I just mentioned, it's allowed IP. It's not going to work, is it? Allowed IP rule set, and you can then add, list, or remove. So we could do a list, and it would show where those are done. So this, for example, the NFS client has one. If you could see that. But you can see exactly what's allowed to connect and what's not. By default, there is no IP rule set, but that's a quick and easy way to see it. You can also just do rule set list again and just list those out. If the firewall is disabled, you can do firewall get, and it'll say enabled is true. So let's say it wasn't. I'll do set. I believe it's set, yep, -- enabled equals false. So if we do a get again, it's going to say, hey, the firewall is disabled. To enable it, you just do -- enabled equals true. Simple enough. And there you go. So not a lot to worry about on the firewall rule set. Just, look at it, make sure it's good. If for some reason they say, hey, I added a rule and it's not there, you can do a rule set and then say firewall rule. That's not it. Firewall rule, you can do set, enable the rules, rule set IDs. Trying to find what else I'm looking for. Oh, there it is. So you can load the firewall module and the rule set. You can unload it, which is going to unload the firewall and the rule set. Just do load to load it up. Make sure you have the current copy of the rule set. So again, nothing too complicated. Worst case for rules not showing up, unload and load. You can also do a refresh right there. Just refresh the rule sets from the config files that we looked at. Again, the rules are /etc/VMware firewall. So they're stored in here in the config files like FDM right there. So if they added a rule, it would be a different XML file. Just make sure they're loaded. But just do a load or unload and refresh and see what happens. ESXi connectivity, I mean, again, the easiest answer there is just do services sh restart. See if it'll reconnect after that. Some things, networks, we talked about this in some of the network troubleshooting, but IP, gateway, VLAN tagging, proper physical NIC uplinks. You know, VLAN tagging could be an option. They could have a broken vSwitch config where it's not set to tag, and they'll say, hey, the switch is set to tag, we can't get to this host, this port group doesn't work. So check VLAN tagging. NIC uplinks and physical switch config is going to be outside scope because you're not going to have access to the physical switches. But the quick and easy way to check some things is just simple pings. I mean, you know, get to a host and make sure you can ping things. Can I ping my gateway? You know, can I ping another host? Can I ping the iSCSI server, the NFS server, things like that. So check that. Check your logs. I know it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Check your VPXA log. And also, on your hosts, it's not etsy log, it's var log. You know, you've got things like, let's see, what am I looking for? You got host dlog. So the last 50 lines of host dlog here will show anything. It'll show if there's an issue, if it's not responding, if there are any problems. You got a VPXA log, and you've got your VM kernels. So, you know, check those as well. I know we all hate looking at log files, but a lot of times there's actual information in there. You just got to dig it out. DCUI. DCUI, you know, is a direct console user interface. You can do a lot of cool stuff with DCUI. Reset the management agents from there instead of SSHing in. Reset the network connections, configurations, and you can get to the shell from there. So again, we'll jump on one of these guys. This is the IPMI control interface. If you have a lab at home or you're building one, I highly suggest you get servers with lights out management. And let me relog in. I use Supermicro motherboards. They're not more expensive than anybody else, and they have built-in IPMI. I don't have any monitors or keyboard or mouse on my systems. So if I need to get to something, I can just load up a Java console. I hate Java, but I hate having to plug in keyboard and mice even more. And we'll pull into the DCUI interface. So I'll do virtual keyboard, hit F2, because passing F2 through a Mac can sometimes be a pain. And we log into DCUI. But from here, you can do a lot of interesting things once the menu comes up. Configure management network. If the IP is wrong and vCenter can't talk and you need to change it, we can do that here. We can change our VLAN tagging right here for the management agents. Change the IP config, DNS, search names, host names, any custom suffixes. You can restart the management network, restarting that interfaces in case there's a problem. You can test it. It'll try to ping some things. You can do a network restore. Be careful doing this, but if you get into an isolated host because of a distributed switch issue, it will rebuild a standard vSwitch with network management capability for you. It just kind of slashes and burns what you have, so use that cautiously. You can do troubleshooting options, you know, enable shells. Here's where you can restart the management agents. Enable the shell, which mine is disabled, one of the issues I'm having there. And you can also do things like disable SSH, but the one I want you to see is you can also restart the management agents right here in the DCUI. Go back. You can view your system logs right here if you don't want to view them off of an SSH into a host. So your host D is your management agent, your VPXA again is your virtual center agent, and your observation logs, your VOBD. So you can look at all of those right here. View other support information if you needed it, and you can reset the whole config, which is kind of like it's going to reset it back to a default. But again, the DCUI is fairly helpful. I just find myself doing most of this SSH'd into the box. But if SSH isn't on, here's a way to get to the same information. But that's it for the lesson. I told you it wasn't complicated. Restart to management agents. If a host isn't talking, do that. If the host isn't talking and there's no VMs on the host that you need to worry about, just reboot the host. That's probably the easy answer there. That way you can just do a complete restart and hopefully it'll come up good and happy and you don't have to worry about VMs. But if you do have to worry about VMs, kick the management agents. If that doesn't work, start looking at log files. VPXA log, especially if it can't talk to vCenter. Host dlog if there's any host issues, things like that. But normally if you can direct connect into the VI client into a host, but it's not talking to vCenter, look at the VPXA log. Look at the VPXA log on the virtual center box, make sure there's no issues there, no problems. But other than that, it's fairly simple. So that's it for this lesson, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.